Welcome back to Character Modeling with me, Steve Moore. We're looking at a sculpt of a character named Shion. This is what we're going to be starting with, and we're going to be taking this model and turning it into this concept as we've reviewed before. Today we're actually kind of going to start looking at posing her out. So stick around. This should be fun. All right. As you remember, maybe recall last week, we had some unfinished business. I was showing you guys the wonders of ZRemesh and how ZBrush, I think, is close to giving us final animatable meshes with a few clicks. It's not there yet, but I think with ZRemesher in combination with ZRemesh guide brushes, you can get pretty close. This is what we ended up with ZRemesh, and it's not perfect, but you can see that we were able to get the loops to generally follow the orbits of the eyes and generally the orbits of the mouth. For this to be really to make this a good animatable mesh, we'd want the loops following the nasal labia fold, starting up in the nostril here all the way down. We'd want very precise loops around the lips and the eyelids as well. And those would be the main things. And then, it depends on how you're rolling in games. This forehead detail would be perfect. We would just add in bump normal maps for such things as wrinkles. Like if he's frowning, we want to see some wrinkles up here, we'd use a texture map. Other approaches, like in film, they sometimes actually will carve in loops for the wrinkles, which is I think that's crazy. I mean, not crazy as in you're crazy for doing it. It's just that's a lot of work. Anywho, but back to this guy. So we had lost a lot of detail in the process. That's the issue we're faced with, right? So okay, so this is our old mesh, looks fine, but it's very dense. And our new mesh, which does not have the detail but has better topology, which is going to be easier to pose and manipulate, like if we wanted to give them an expression, etc. So to fix that, all we have to do is subdivide him a few times. So now he's nice and smooth. And we'll go back down to our source mesh. This guy will turn on transparency. Now we are on our ZRemesh head. Our new mesh is active, and we go down to project. I'm working in real world units, so these default values will work quite nicely. Project all, and let's see what we got. We've got both meshes visible right now, so we'll just turn the other one off. And there you go. So now you can see, we've got some of the detail back. It's still a little pixelated, so let's see, a little pixelated, but another subdivision should fix that. Just boom. You don't need to go crazy out of the gate with the subdivisions. Subdivide as much as you need to. Reproject. And as you get denser, it will take longer, obviously, to reproject. But this still should not be too bad. And there you go. So we'll turn off the source mesh. And now we're getting to the point where the two become hard to distinguish between. There's the original and the new one. With, it should be said, the topology we want. So we can now jump up and down in subdivision levels. I can do some crazy stuff to this guy, like I could make his head a bit bigger here, or his nose a bit longer, like Pinocchio nose. And as I subdivide it, all the high-res detail propagates to the higher subdivided model. And there you go. With that, we're going to move back to Shion. So the reason for the sojourn down Mystery Guest Lane was to really just to show you guys how we got to this point as far as the head and the body goes. This model started the same way as my previous example, you know, cubes and boxes masked out, and then I ultimately remeshed this model to, you know, so that I could deform her and animate her. So the base mesh, if I turn on wireframe for a second here, so this is the topology. It's a little better than the previous mesh I showed you, but not perfect actually. So if we drop down a few subdivision levels to the base here, so you can see that this is the loops are definitely you know, wrapping around the eyelids and not forming nice distinct circles. The nasal, you know, the loops start up here by the nostril and wrap all the way around the mouth, and they the mouth forms concentric circles radiating out. There are some in the process of sculpting this lady. Is because full story, you know, base mesh was masked out. That was turned into a generic female, and then from that I turned it into this. In the process of doing that, I did my loops on my mouth to get a little wonky, and depending on whether I end up animating her face or not, I would fix that stuff. Also, this is not ideal up here. This topology, this big fat patch right in the middle of her forehead, that could be better. I definitely could do a few more loops around there. It could be a little denser and more even. But with that said, what we have here is a mesh that I can very easily deform. You'll notice, for example, details like the kneecaps. This was done by hand. I have retopologized this so that when I bend her knees, there's more topology there than over there, and that's because at this base level, this mesh could in fact be taken into Maya, rigged and animated. So so the nice thing about that is if I want to make a change or perhaps make a blend shape or a wrinkle map, I can go back to in a pose. I can go back into ZBrush and I can sculpt those details on directly onto this mesh and bake that out. Anywho, so, and that's what we want to do. We basically we want to take this model and go into Maya and put her in the pose of our concept here, as you'll recall. And you'll notice too with the concept, the model, you know, we're going to rebuild all this halter top, this stuff, the dress, you know, the belt, the dress, the shoes are all going to be remodeled, and we're going to model her cybernetic legs, which she has here. Cool. So we're going to take this model into Maya now. With her lowest subdivision level active, I will export out an OBJ. When you do this stuff, make sure to turn groups off, because if you have any poly groups, it's going to export them as separate meshes, and then I will just export her. Like that. Boom. So here we are in Maya, and we have the same base mesh we were just looking at in ZBrush, and I have gone to the trouble of adding a skeleton. I just started with an existing skeleton, the one that I originally built for the generic female, and I reproportioned it to match my new character. And we've got some IK handles so that we can pose out her. If I grab one of the handles, like we can just grab her leg here, you know, and pose it using IK. For the arms, we're going to use forward kinematics, i.e. just straight up joint rotations, you know, so we can pose her arm out like that. I just found that to be a little bit easier. And there you go. So before beginning, I did grab my root joint on my skeleton and I set a key at 0, making sure that everything below, all keyable attributes and everything below is selected. And I set a key there at 0. And then I was also sure to grab my IK handles here and key those too. Otherwise, the feet will go off in wacky directions. So the reason for that is so that after posing the model, we can always return to the bind pose at 0, like that. So we posed her, and oh, by the way, yeah, you're gonna see that my weighting here is far from perfect because, yeah, we have some shearing going on around the shoulder here. Fortunately, it's not so bad that I can't just smooth that out in ZBrush, so I'm going to roll with that. I made a quick proxy for her cell phone, so that travels with her hands, and it's in the right position. We can add the final model in later when we make it. Please excuse the censorship boxes, but I need to be careful. There you go. So that's pretty much it. So we could, yes, we could use transpose and ZBrush to pose her. However, the reason I'm using the joints is because it is a lot more precise. I can guarantee that my any parts that I want to add to her, I can get them into the same position because I can link, as I did with the cell phone here, I can link that to the skeleton, and that will travel with it. And anything else, which, for example, I know I'm going to make a new belt, I'm going to make new shoes here, and so I want to be sure that I can position those at frame 0 in the bind pose, and they will all follow along for the ride when the character is animated. Cool. Also, it's something I didn't mention was this here is basically, it's proxy here because for this project we're going to make hair cards. But in the back of but I roughed this in because the style is so quirky that I felt like I needed to figure it out in 3D space before I even attempted the actually making hair cards for that. Also, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about 3D printing this character, in which case we'll have to make modeled hair. So that's everything that's going on in the back of my mind here. And with that, now we've got our pose. All we have to do is export these pieces back into ZBrush as OBJs, and Bob's your auntie. Okay, guys, we'll wrap things up this week. Just bringing in that pose that we were looking at in Maya. So I'll grab the body here, and the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm at this highest subdivision level. As you can see here, I am going to throw it on a layer, so we can always come back to this pose. So we have this as our bind pose, and we're going to throw this layer on to actually bring in the selfie pose. And the first thing we'll need to do is drop down to the same subdivision level as the mesh we're importing. So all over here, and I'm going to go document, new document, and just bring in her, let's see, pose here. Boom. And there we go. Did cheat a little bit. Obviously, it had the censorship boxes all ready to go, everything in place, but you get the idea. Some work ahead of us. The fun thing is, and the challenge for me is going to be, I don't have reference other than what I found for the concept. So a lot of this is going to be constructing anatomy, like figuring out what this anatomy should actually look like from my head and from what I can find on the internet. Cool news, I'm going to be going to New Zealand for a month here. So I'll be down there trying to get better at surfing. Does mean I'll be taking a break from this, so I will catch you guys at the beginning of January. All right, ciao.